Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the what if. What is it? He asked, apprehension once again gripping him. However, it instantly shifted to sheer shock when he looked at her free hand. A small box was open in her palm, revealing a familiar jewel. Taking in a deep, shuddering breath, Yoruichi looked Ichigo in the eye and said, "Ichigo Kurosaki, I love you. I choose you, for all of eternity, Ichigo, I choose you. My body, mind, and soul are yours for all eternity." "I ask," she began, pausing to take another shaky breath. Continuing, she said, "I ask that you accept that. I'm asking you to forgive me, to love me, to be mine and let me prove, every day of our existence, that you are my soulmate." Pausing once more, she placed the box in his hand as she slowly slid to one knee. "Ichigo, I am asking you to marry me." Chapter 20. Not even the sounds of gasps carried by the wind were enough to break the tension. Standing mutely, Ichigo's only movement had been his jaw falling at the scene before him. What just happened? His heart was beating wildly in his chest, his mind barely able to keep up with the events as they unfolded, as it was all becoming simply too much. Too many monumental events in his life, too many shifts in emotion, had occurred too recently. Pain, anger, resignation, loss, bloodlust, connection, power, and now, elation. Hearing a throat clearing from where the stunned crowd had gathered, Ichigo's mind began to slowly work again, though he was once more overwhelmed by a stream of questions. Yoruichi Shihoin is proposing, to me. I mean, my squad was attacked, my family too, I just killed several people. She just killed Noboru, and she's now proposing. She was serious, wasn't she? She's not scared of me, but really does love me. There's no way she'd do this in front of the entire Seraiti if she didn't mean it. She doesn't expect me to wear that ring, right? Wait, what the hell? I was supposed to do the proposing. Yet, amidst all of the worry, the questions, and the stubborn indignation, Ichigo felt his chest swelling. This is what he had wanted. All that he had wanted. Even with all that had happened, as well as all of the work that he knew they would have to do to make them work, Ichigo knew that their being together could only be described as right. Logic, reason, and facts paled in the face of what he knew to be a foundational truth of his very being. They belonged together, and now they could be, forever. This one thought was quickly becoming the lone light in the night that had overtaken his heart. Amidst all of the deaths and pain, the fears and doubts that he had so recently faced, yet still plagued his mind and heart, this one gave him a glimmer of hope, a shadow of reason, and he clung desperately to it. Ichigo's heart pounded even faster as he inhaled, preparing to speak. He felt slightly panicked, though, worried that one wrong move could shatter the moment. This one moment, this chance, was one that he could not let slip away. His mind was overrun with a rush of hope, of a promise of relief from the torment that he had endured. Ichigo would say it, he would say yes, and all would be well. What else could he do? Finally finding his voice, he began to form words before a different voice stopped him. As the innately familiar voice spoke, the world around him slowed to a stop, and all color, aside from the woman kneeling before him, faded to gray. "I don't think so, King. XXXXXX. Yoruichi's heart was pounding as she waited for anything. She had just bared her soul to Ichigo in front of the entire Seraiti, and moments began to feel like ages as she stared into his shell-shocked face. She knew that she couldn't blame him for it. His mind must have been in unbelievable turmoil after everything that had occurred. All of the stress, the grief, and the anger would have certainly taken its toll on him, but she was hoping that the sincerity of her words, of her gesture, would be enough to reach him, to make Ichigo see that she was not lying. Yet, as more unbearable moments passed, her own mind began to feel strained. She could see the internal battle within his eyes, his emotions playing through with disturbing speed and severity. This was fuel to the rising insecurity that she was feeling with every second that passed. "Please Ichigo, please say yes. This is not a game, nor is it some cruel joke. I will give you everything I am, just please, say yes." Her pulse quickened even further as she saw his mouth move to speak. She could tell that his breathing had quickened substantially, and she was beginning to feel hopeful. However, As his mouth began to move, the world around her faded to gray, with Ichigo being the lone bit of color. Before she could begin to panic, a voice from behind her said, "I don't think so, King." Turning, Yoruichi saw the imposing and fully released figures of Shiro and Zangetsu walking towards them. Furious at the interruption, especially as it seemed to be to discourage Ichigo from saying yes, she was about to release her displeasure upon the two spirits before noticing that the rest of the world around them had completely stilled, seemingly frozen in time. "What are you?" she began, only to be cut off by a jet-black blade appearing at her neck. "Shut up, kitten. We don't give a shit about your anger or indignation, so just sit there like a good girl until I tell you that you can talk," the masked hollow growled, pressing the blade against her dark skin. "Shiro, what are you doing?" Ichigo asked, alarmed at his spirit's words and actions. It was his other spirit that spoke, however, as Zangetsu replied, "Taking part in a decision that affects all of us." Saying nothing further, the two spirits approached the pair, each grabbing a shoulder of the one in front of them before a large wave of black Reiatsu swallowed them. XXXXXX. Landing so heavily that he lost his breath, Ichigo was instantly aware that he was back in his devastated inner world. Brilliant strikes of lightning still illuminated the skies, as the tumultuous waters continued their assault against the towering structures, the spray hitting his face alongside the pouring rain. Rising to his feet, he was both amazed and horrified as he saw Yoruichi land not far from where he was, the impact causing a large splash. "What? How is she? I mean, how is it even possible?" His confusion, while strong, was overshadowed by his concern, and he began to run to her, only to receive a heavy fist to the stomach, doubling him over. A sharp kick was added almost immediately after, bringing him to his knees. "Not so fast, Kingy. You're going to have to sit this one out," Shiro said, standing above his heavily breathing wielder. "What are you doing?" Ichigo shouted, his voice nearly being drowned out amidst the raging storm. Finally gaining his breath back, he attempted to stand, only to be instantly bound by numerous black chains. Wrapping around each forearm, the chains pulled him back to his knees, where even more came from seemingly nowhere to bind his legs. "What in the hell is going on?" he bellowed. "I thought we had an agreement. I am the king here, so what do you think you're doing?" Ichigo was beginning to panic as he watched Yoruichi stand up. His spirits bring him and Yoruichi to his inner world, only to bind him. This was bad, very bad. He wasn't ready for anything more. This day had already strained him beyond his known limits, and he didn't know how much longer he could keep himself together. "Shiro, Zangetsu, stop. Whatever it is that you're doing, stop," he started, his voice rising with his concern. Both spirits were before him, emotionlessly looking down on him as they were intermittently illuminated in brilliant streaks of lightning. "Ichigo, this is not something that can be avoided." While her actions in the fight were quite telling, neither Shiro, nor myself, are satisfied. Also, your state of mind was not right for such a question to be asked. "Satisfied? My state of mind wasn't right. You don't get to decide when I am," Ichigo growled before being interrupted by another kick to the stomach. "Ah, shove it up your ass, King. You were only going to say yes, for the same reason that you initially wanted my resurrection, to kill the pain. We know what you're going through. We are, as well. Still, you should have learned by now that we'll never let you have the easy way out. You're the king, so quit being such a bitch and act like it." Plus, the hollow spirit paused with a disturbing growing glow in his eyes as he watched a confused but furious Yoruichi stomp up to them. "Plus, I promised Kitty some playtime, should she make the world look like this again." The moment Shiro finished, his hand struck out and savagely backhanded Yoruichi, sending her careening off of the side of the building. Turning back to Ichigo, a dark chuckle emanated from behind the fearsome mask as he said, "Now you stay put, while she and I have a little fun." Ichigo's resounding bellow was lost in the crashing of the waves and thunder as Shiro disappeared in the direction that he had struck Yoruichi. XXXXX. Yoruichi was having a hard time deciding when she had experienced more shock. Proposing to Ichigo, only to be interrupted by his inner spirits, who decided to bring her into Ichigo's inner world. Not only that, but his inner world happened to be a hurricane-plagued crisis zone, in which his inner hollow had backhanded the hell out of her, launching her across a roaring ocean to land on a battered skyscraper. She wasn't sure that shock would quite cover it. However, it seemed that she was facing the music, as it was, just as she had done with Juryoku. These spirits seemed bound and determined to beat her senseless for what she had done. TCH, if only I were that lucky. Fate, the universe, whatever force out there that was putting things in motion, seemed to have a bone to pick with her, as senseless was something that she was certain would not be possible. From the moment she had slammed into the glass and metal of this world, realization had been dawning far faster than she had wanted to experience. A memory of the night that this nightmare had all started played through her mind as she began to move to her feet. "Shiro, please let him go," Yoruichi begged, scared he would actually kill Noboru. This was getting too far out of hand, and she knew it had to stop before her mindless actions got someone killed. "Shut up, you backstabbing bitch. I told you what would happen if you made it rain again, and you brought a fucking hurricane. You and I will have the playtime I promised soon enough," he snarled. Finally standing upright in the rain, she was alerted to the arrival of the fierce form of Shiro in his resurrection. "You seem surprised," was all the towering figure said as he finally stopped a mere arm's length away. Opening her mouth to speak, Yoruichi tried, but couldn't make words come out. Realization was far too strong, as the memory playing in her mind could only mean one thing. This was her fault. The destruction, the turmoil, the unending chaos, all came from what she did. Her lapse in judgment, her mistake, had caused the man she loved more types of pain than she could comprehend. Falling to her knees, Yoruichi gasped for breath as her chest tightened. Looking up at the demonic beast before her, she spoke. "I never wanted this. I didn't mean for anything even remotely like this to happen. I know that you and Zangetsu must hate me, but I was trying to fix it, to try to make it right. So you pop the question after the king cleans up the mess you made. Ichigo has killed before, we both know this, but you brought out something a hell of a lot darker. Don't get me wrong, I don't have the first problem with what he did. The bastards tried to steal from my king, to break his core. They're lucky they only got that much, and that I didn't get out. Why did you stop us? I was trying to make everything right. I mean, I even asked in front of the entire Seraiti, just to prove to him that he is never a secret to be kept," Yoruichi began, not wanting to imagine the horrors that would have come from Shiro getting out. "I know that you promised what you called playtime, and I'm not going to back out, but couldn't it have been after he answered? He believed me. He was going to say yes, I know he was," she shouted, frustrated because the more she thought about it, the more certain she was that Ichigo would have said yes, ending so much of their turmoil. She was caught unaware yet again as a stark white hand materialized from nowhere, sending her flat with a sickening crunch of glass. Before even she could react, the arch of a clawed foot began to press on her throat. Looking up, she saw the fearsome mask looking down at her, the eyes an empty black. "Who the fuck is it that you think you have to convince? So what, you propose to him, and everything just goes back to normal? You're a bigger idiot than I thought if you believed that we would take this lying down," Shiro bellowed, increasing the pressure on the tiny neck below his foot. "No," he continued, his voice dropping into an icy growl. "I will never accept a queen that I don't trust to protect his heart. You had your chance, and we reject you as queen." Yoruichi's eyes went wide at the declaration. Though the storm raged around them, she heard every word in vivid clarity. She knew then that she was only brought here to have what she had done thrown in her face. She was here because they wanted their pound of flesh. No, she wouldn't accept this. She saw Ichigo's eyes, and knew that he still loved her. There was no way that she would ever give that up, in her spirit's agreement or not. Unable to make any sound besides a choked gurgle, she raised her Reiatsu and aimed a powerful punch at the knee closest to her right hand. To her surprise, her wrist was caught just before she made contact, and she found herself quickly jerked upright by the same wrist and brought face to face with the mask she had just recently kissed. Ah, kitten, that won't work here," Shiro said with his most patronizing tone. "You forget, this is our world. You're only a guest." Wasting no more words, the towering hollow gripped her wrist tighter, spun, and slammed her once more into the beaten building at his feet. After a moment, He released her arm and walked away. Then why bring me here, you bastard? Yoruichi screamed as she made her way to her feet. Wiping blood away from one of the gashes that had appeared on her face, she readied herself for another attack, only to see that Shiro had stopped at the edge of the building that they were standing on, his back to her. Hearing no response, and seeing no movement, she slowly moved towards him, continuing to shout, "I asked you a question. If you're rejecting me, then why bring me here?" Once she had reached the side, she fell silent as she followed the towering hollow's gaze. Before them was another skyscraper, yet unlike the rest that she had seen. While many of the buildings were beaten and battered, this one was all but destroyed. Every window was shattered, with jagged edges of glass catching the glare from the brilliant strikes of lightning. The very beams of the building were bent, making her surprised that this particular one was still upright. Yet, as she continued to look, she saw strange markings on the sides in the occasional light. Long, nondescript gray beams were placed all over the side of the tower. There was no specific pattern that she could tell, only that the beams seemed to be wherever the damage was greatest. "It's a sad sight, isn't it?" Shiro muttered. Noticing that he still hadn't moved, Yoruichi didn't answer. "You don't have to answer, I know that it is. You know what these buildings are. They're all pieces of his heart. We're standing on the one that represents his courage, his will to overcome. This one was broken only a few days ago. It took a while, but we finally got him to fix it." Standing in awe at the confirmation of what she had begun to suspect was the truth, Yoruichi felt a tear escape. Just like the huge number of swords that had represented the aspects of his heart in his Bankai training, these buildings were the same. She couldn't help but to have a new, and more painful, appreciation for the sheer wonder that was Ichigo Kurisaki's heart. And the absolute devastation that she had caused it. She was beginning to understand why Shiro and Zangetsu wouldn't accept her. There is no way that he could truly love me, now. I've helped to all but destroy his heart. Even if he can fix them, why would he want to come back to me, who did this to him? It was because of me that Kato and Noboru went after him, and his family. It's my fault that so many died. So you're starting to get it, huh? Shiro said. Turning, he looked down at the woman who broke his king's heart. This ain't us trying to kick your ass for what you did. This is us making you witness the consequences of your actions, and of my resolve to protect my king, no matter the cost. Pausing, he stretched his arm and pointed to the patched building. That's his trust, or at least his ability to open his heart to others. That building is pretty damn important to this place, to who he is. Every battle he's ever fought has been to protect others. His friends, his family, you, everyone has been affecting this one. King gave you free reign of this one, and me and the old man had never seen the weather better than when he was with you. Then, everything went to hell. Of course, it would be, Yoruichi thought as sorrow once again gripped her heart. Even after all that had happened, all that he had been put through, Ichigo's heart still remained intact for those he loved. Though the notion cut her to her very core, she knew that this building, this battered, beaten tower, was something that she would now die to protect. Though she knew that she wasn't to be its protector, she couldn't help but feel a fierce desire to keep it safe. "What are you saying, Shiro?" Yoruichi asked, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Are you saying that you want me to witness what I did? I see it, I want to fix it, to protect it forever." She was cut off, though, by the sound of laughter. Incensed at the notion of laughter at a moment such as the one they were in, she ground her teeth as she contemplated attacking the hollow who ruled the world she was in. Once the laughter had died down, she turned on Shiro and demanded, "How can you laugh? I know what I did, but I want to make it right." Meeting her gaze, the hollow said, "Seems like you haven't heard a single word I've said, kitten. I told you, I'd protect him regardless of the cost." Yoruichi felt resigned, as a brilliant red light began to build in Shiro's hand. "So he does want to kill me. It's nothing less than I deserve." Holding her arms out wide, she looked up and said, "Go ahead, then. I deserve that." However, her blood ran cold at the humorless chuckle that was his response. "You just don't get it," he said, the red light continuing to build. "I told you, you are here to be a witness. Now, watch me end what you know of Ichigo Kurisaki's heart." The moment he finished speaking, The light left his palm, hurtling through the air and slamming into the patched building with a powerful explosion and creating a large, charred hole. "What are you?" Yoruichi began to shout before a blade pressed into her neck. "The cost of protecting the king is his heart. XXXXXX. Ichigo struggled against the chains that held him down. No matter how hard he shook, nor how high he raised his reiatsu, they would not break. His panic was increased at the fact that he could neither see, nor hear, Shiro or Yoruichi. They had disappeared into the storm, and the only sign of them that he could gather was a large explosion that erupted a fair distance away. His mind was once again feeling strained to the point of breaking. He had just gotten Yoruichi back, only to have her taken from him by his own inner spirits. He couldn't quell his confusion, as he had just recently come back to peaceful terms with both of his spirits. "Zangetsu, let me go, now," he shouted once more, his voice hoarse from his constant bellows. The stoic spirit had taken to ignoring him, choosing to look out over the distance in silence. He was able to see through the storm, and was currently witnessing Shiro's conversation with Yoruichi. "I know you can hear me, you bastard. Let me up, now. You aren't going to kill her. I swear to you, if you do, I'll make this look like heaven compared to what will happen," Ichigo continued shouting, fear lacing his voice. The spirit knew that Ichigo must have been beyond his limits, as he was not one to threaten. Finally turning to his wielder, the spirit was overcome with conflicting emotions. Seeing Ichigo bound in his own chains, exhausted and screaming his lungs out fought against his very nature. However, the fear he saw in Ichigo's eyes was more than he could stand. To have faced what they all had together, only to give in to fear made Zangetsu beyond furious. Unable to take the look anymore, he walked over to where his wielder was struggling and stopped, saying nothing. Looking down on the soaked and straining man, Zangetsu suddenly snapped his leg forward into Ichigo's unprotected midsection, bowing him forward. After retracting his leg, he grabbed a handful of orange hair and slammed his wielder's head into the glass beneath it. "Enough. I grow tired of your shouting and your pitiful fear. I will only say this once. Though what you want to protect has always been different from what I want to protect, Shiro and I are inseparably a part of you," he snapped before turning away once more. Coughing, as he had inhaled water when gasping for breath, Ichigo was on his side, his head still resting in the indentation that had been made from his Zanpakuto's assault. Even if he hadn't been dazed from the strike, he doubted that he would have been able to make sense of what he had just heard. He didn't know what to do. His reiatsu was being used to trap him, and his murderous hollow side was playing with the love of his life. His Zanpakuto spirit had just smashed his face into the side of a skyscraper, and had given a cryptic message that he could make no sense of. Trying to wrap his mind around what was happening, Ichigo was surprised to see Zangetsu kneel down by his head. Though he looked sympathetic, there was iron resolve in his eyes. "I know that this is hard for you, Ichigo, however it is the only way we can move forward." The moment that he finished speaking, Ichigo felt a heavy pressure on the back of his head, before darkness overtook him. XXXXXX. The cost of protecting the king is his heart. Yoruichi's eyes were wide as what she had just seen and heard registered in her mind. He just attacked Ichigo's heart. He put a hole in Ichigo's ability to open his heart to others. To me, he wants me to watch him take Ichigo's heart away from me permanently. Before she could react, the blade at her throat pressed more insistently against her skin. "Don't be so self-absorbed. This is so much more than just taking him away from you. You're just getting to see the beginning of a different life for King. If no one can get into his heart, then they can't pull this shit and make this world like it is. It's pretty simple, really," Shiro said as another red light began to build in his hand. "Leave his heart alone," Yoruichi growled lowly, though she knew he could hear her. Seeing the red orb expand much more quickly than before, she knew that she had to act. Tensing her body, she waited for a lapse in the hollow's concentration before she struck. The lapse never came as, without warning, the light leapt from Shiro's hand and caused another powerful explosion in the side of the building. This time, the attack hit the corner of the building, digging out a large chunk of the tower. "No!" she cried as lightning struck once more, illuminating the massive amount of damage. She froze, however, as the hollow began to speak. Did you even stop and think about what those gray panels are? In case you're wondering, they're patches where he has tried to make it through this. King has been trying as hard as he can to believe in you, in love. He can't help himself but to hope, and despite my best efforts, that bastard just can't give up for long. Pausing, Shiro generated another large red orb in his hand. Yoruichi wasted no time, ducking under the blade and connecting a sharp kick to the now glowing hand. She couldn't help the sharp intake of breath as it felt that her foot had connected with granite. However, her effort was not in vain, as the bright red orb was launched harmlessly into the sky. Her success came at a price, though, as another devastating fist leveled her once more. "Don't even try that crap," Shiro said, sounding unusually serious as he spun to face her. "King doesn't need your pity, or whatever sympathy play you're trying to pull off. Besides, if you love him so much, why are you trying to screw up what could take away his pain? That tower is his biggest weakness, because it lets people like you have the power to break him, so it has to go." "Shut up," Yoruichi shouted as she stood up. She could barely believe what she was hearing, but she knew that she would be damned if she let it stand. Though the very environment around her fought against her, she tried to raise her Reiatsu, and marched up to the towering hollow who, though he acted serious, seemed to only be toying with her. That's his greatest strength. Ichigo's heart is everything. Every amazing thing that Ichigo has done has been for someone else. He's gotten stronger, fought impossible battles, even died to protect others. Ichigo has always been willing to lay his soul on the line to protect others, it's just who he is. The growl that emanated from Shiro, as she finished speaking, was truly fearsome. "It's just who he is," he whispered, the timbre of his voice beyond menacing. Without warning, what felt like a mountain of pressure began to press upon the devastated world. During the bright flashes of lightning, Yoruichi noticed wisps of black Reiatsu beginning to swirl around the infuriated hollow, sometimes blurring her sight of him. Before she could respond, a stark white hand wrapped around her throat, nearly crushing it in an iron grip as it lifted her off of her feet. Struggling to breathe, Yoruichi desperately gripped the hand on her neck as it pulled her closer to Shiro's mask. "You have the balls to stand there and try to tell me, the incarnation of his instinct, who my king is. You have the nerve to try and explain his heart to me. You know nothing. Get Sagaden's HO." As he bellowed furiously, his sword-bearing hand raised up and swung towards the building, sending a massive wave of energy hurtling towards it. Staring on in horror, the hand around her neck loosened, and she dropped to the side of the building that they stood upon. When she finally caught her breath, she began to raggedly scream at the devastation that Shiro's last attack had caused. An enormous portion of the building that represented Ichigo's ability to love, to trust, was simply gone. The hole that had been created revealed the inner structures, and was allowing the torrential waves to fill the building, causing even more damage. Staggering to her feet, Yoruichi was about to leap to the building before another presence halted her. As she spun to see who had arrived, she was stunned to see Zangetsu standing before her, staring coldly alongside Shiro. "Where is Ichigo? How could you allow this?" she croaked weakly, her throat still suffering from the hollow's abuse. "He said you only wanted to protect him, but you allowed his heart to be." "Enough, Yoruichi Shihoin. The creator of this hellish storm has no right to condemn our actions of necessity. We will do whatever is required to protect Ichigo, even from you," the stoic spirit snapped. "I was trying to make it right. I was trying to undo all of the pain I had brought," she screamed, her voice gaining volume, but still ragged. Her confused anger was stilled, however, as she watched the two spirits of her love begin to dissolve before her eyes. She quickly became alarmed as they hadn't dissolved, but had combined. Towering above her was a wondrous and horrifying combination of both spirits. The younger version of Zangetsu's face, with Shiro's eye and horn attached to a body that radiated raw, unfathomable power. Coming to a stop just before her, the voice that she heard was Zangetsu's cold monotone, however layered with the passion that Shiro always carried. "Your naivete is no longer acceptable. We are the representation, the manifestation, of Ichigo's soul, so how can you say something as idiotic as that to us? Undo the pain. You think such a thing can be done? Can you even quantify such pain? You still do not understand what you have done, but you will." Wasting no further words, the spirit landed a punishing blow into Yoruichi's stomach, followed by a knee to her face. Once she was dazed, a powerful hand grabbed her face and launched her away, sending her hurtling towards the all but demolished representation of Ichigo's love. XXXXXX. Ichigo stirred awake with a groan. Whatever Zangetsu had done had given him an incredible headache, which did nothing to help his mood. Looking down, he saw that the jet-black chains were still in place. Though Zangetsu was nowhere to be seen, the chains still held as strongly as ever. Trying to quell the quickly resurfacing panic about just what was happening to Yoruichi, Ichigo thought about the last thing that Zangetsu had said to him. Enough. I grow tired of your shouting and your pitiful fear. I will only say this once. Though what you want to protect has always been different from what I want to protect, Shiro and I are inseparably a part of you. I know that this is hard for you, Ichigo, however it is the only way we can move forward. What did he mean by that? Inseparably a part of me. That goes without saying, but what does he mean by it being the only way we can move forward? Nothing was making sense. His inner spirits had dragged both he and Yoruichi into his inner world, chained him, and was doing any number of things to the woman he loved. Yes, he knew that they were furious with her, and that Shiro had promised play time, but why now? His hollow's earlier words came back to him, and made him pause. Was Shiro right? Was he treating her proposal like his resurrection, and only going to say yes to stop the pain? Ichigo wished that he could answer no, but the truth was, the spirit was at least partially right. Accepting her proposal would have been an instant salve and a perfect distraction from all that he had experienced. Taking a deep breath to calm himself, Ichigo tried to work through the last several days of his life to see if he could make sense of it. Yes, Yoruichi had kissed another man and unleashed all of the baggage that came with it, but what about everything else? What about his innocent squad members who had died or been maimed so senselessly? What about his family, who had also been attacked? What about Nell, and the rest of the Arrancar? Was he really going to use Yoruichi's proposal as a way to ignore the pain and work that he had yet to face? Hanging his head in shame, Ichigo grit his teeth. He had done it again. Shiro was right, there would never be an easy way out for him, nor should there be. Though the situation was not of his making, he was not going to let all of the ones that he loved deal with this on their own, without Ichigo. Why? Ichigo was a captain. Ichigo was a lover. Ichigo was a cousin. Ichigo was a friend. Ichigo meant something, and not just to himself. He would find a way through the pain. He would be strong for them all, and for himself. He would also talk to Yoruichi. Though his yes to her proposal would have been brought from fear, it was by no means insincere. Ichigo would reclaim his life, the right way. As he processed each thought, loud chinks could be heard above the waves and wind. The rain itself began to weaken, though only marginally. Looking down, he saw the chains that had bound him so securely to the tower begin to loosen slightly and slowly retract. They wanted me to get here on my own, he thought angrily. How many times did he have to go through this lesson? How many times have they had to drive the truth into his thick head? No more. They were right. Ichigo would start to act like the king he was called, and trust in the spirits that truly were a part of him. Upon that realization, the chains were suddenly moving far too slow for his satisfaction. Though not fully released, Ichigo began to raise his reiatsu and struggled to his feet. Gritting his teeth and clutching his hands into fists, he pulled as hard as he could against his bindings. The sounds of groaning and breaking metal rose above the noise around him. Bellowing with all his might, Ichigo released his seal, shattering the last of the chains and sending out a wave of energy that forced mountainous waves to fly off into every direction. Finally freed, he noticed smoke still rising from an area far in the distance, as well as a loud ringing noise. Knowing that he would both find and deliver answers there, he took off through the driving rain. XXXXXX. Yoruichi groaned in pain as she struck the internal structure of the demolished building. She was powerful, but in this world, it meant nothing. The combination of Shiro and Zangetsu had sent her flying without much effort, and her landing was brutal. Staggering to her feet on a solid center beam that stretched beyond her sight, she was alerted to the combined spirit's arrival by the soft static of a sonido. Turning, she saw the stoic being glaring at her with a burning anger. Attempting to stop them once more, She tried to raise her Reiatsu again as she called out, "Stop. Leave his heart alone, and just kill me instead, because I will not let you hurt him further. We both know that it's what you want, anyways." Her plea was met with a humorless chuckle. "Again, your naivete is unacceptable. We told you what we wanted, to protect Ichigo. You are simply here to witness our method. The cost to protect him is his heart, and you are standing on the core of what makes Ichigo able to love, to trust another being." As the spirits stopped speaking, the blade they held glowed a sinister red, gaining intensity as they raised it above their head. "Witness our protection of Ichigo, Yoruichi Shihoin. Get Sagaten's Ho." Unable to raise her Reiatsu enough to block the attack, Yoruichi did the only thing that she could do and leapt in front of the massive wave of energy. The pain was immeasurable. Her skin felt as if it were on fire, and her bones felt as if they were going to shatter. The pain was intensified when her back struck the same center beam with a loud thud. Unable to tell if it was a byproduct of hitting her head so hard, or the attack making contact, she could only wince as a loud gong-like sound rang throughout the stormy world. After what felt like days, she stirred, rolling to her side. Sensing the presence of Shiro and Zangetsu's combined form just above her, she groaned, "I told you, you'll have to kill me, because I won't let you destroy this place." A small scoff was her response, as she looked up at the face of her opponent, only to have the rain blur her vision. "You are an idiot, Yoruichi. Look below you, does this place seem to have gone anywhere?" Snapping her eyes open, she slowly brought herself up to her knees and looked at the beam below her. Even with the rain and waves splattering water over it, she could see that the beam was free of any damage whatsoever. "They can't fully break his heart," she thought as she ran her hand along the rigid metal, unaware that her thoughts were open to them here. "Of course we can't, you fool," the voice bellowed. Immediately after, a loud ching rang out, quickly drowned out by Yoruichi's screams of pain. Looking up, Yoruichi saw the solid black blade of Shiro and Zangetsu pierced through her outstretched hand and into the beam below her. The pain was incredible, as the blade itself seemed to be crying out, nearly overwhelming her senses. She tried to pull the blade out, only to find it being held in place by the furious spirits. Before she could compose herself and try to move, a hand roughly grabbed a handful of her hair and forced her head to the edge of the plank that they were on. "Swallow your pain and look at what you've done. You brought this hell on us. Do you have any idea how much we hate the rain? Can you even comprehend how much we despise it when his heart is like this? Our most powerful attack could not even scratch his heart, yet you are able to do so much more to the very pillar that supports this entire aspect of his heart." Unable to understand what the spirits meant, Yoruichi's screams, breath, and heart all paused as lightning flashed once more, illuminating the metal. Had she not been looking right at it, she would have missed it, as it was so small, but now she could not take her eyes off of it. Focusing her eyes through the pane, she saw a small chip in the edge of the metal. It was nothing large, like the massive destruction that surrounded the pillar, but given what she had just experienced, this tiny damage spoke volumes. Feeling her head being jerked back, she found herself eye to eye with the combined spirit's nearly crazed glare. "Do you see what you've done? This place has been beaten, this place has been battered, but this pillar has never been damaged. Never. You're the only one to ever do this." Yoruichi felt her heart breaking all over again as she looked into the frenzied, agonized eyes of Ichigo's inner spirits. The usual stoic expressions, the hateful glares, and the cocky grins were nowhere to be seen. The eyes were wide, panicked, the expression was one of being lost, and the voice was wild, filled with grief. The blade, still lodged in her hand, was also crying out, conveying not only the pain that this soul was feeling in terrifying clarity, but of something much more consuming. Fear. Immeasurable, incomprehensible fear. The outside of the building may have been demolished, but this pillar was unscathed, apart from her own influence. She couldn't truly fathom the fear that the two spirits must feel at the power that she obviously carried in this world. To know what she was capable of, and for their wielder to accept her back, she could easily see how that would be too much for them. "This was what they wanted me to see," she realized before her head was again snapped in a different direction. This time, it was to view a hand that, now without a sword, was holding a small piece of metal in exactly the same shape as the chip on the pillar. "No, This is what we wanted you to see. This is what you are capable of. Ichigo Kurosaki has been hurt, broken, and even killed. But you are the only one who ever made him give up. He gave you the power too. The shouts were silenced as Yoruichi slowly reached out and gently grabbed the chip of metal from the merged being's hand. Bringing it close to her face, she softly kissed the shard before looking into the eyes of each aspect of her lover's soul. Shiro, Zangetsu, I am so sorry. I know that what I've done can't be undone, but I swear to you, I will protect his heart for the rest of my existence. I will never let this happen to him anymore. I will love Ichigo forever, and he'll never feel this hurt again. The spirit stilled at the touch, and gazed fiercely into her eyes. They knew their king's decision far more than he did, himself, but it was still a worrying notion. The weather was slowly, but unmistakably, beginning to calm, and it was more than welcome, but how long could that actually last? How long before she did something like this again? Unable to sense any deceit from the woman that they had pinned to the beam, they yanked the blade from her hand. They felt that Ichigo had freed himself, steeled his resolve, and was on his way, but there was one more thing to be said, one final message to convey. The moment the blade left, blood began to heavily flow from Yoruichi's hand, and she felt weak as all of the fighting and blood loss caught up with her. Coming to her knees, she steadied herself and met Shiro and Zangetsu's gaze, only to have the front of her shirt grasped and herself dragged close to their face. Know this, King has gotten himself straight and decided that you're still his queen. We have to accept it for now, but there are no chances after this. If you bring this hell on him again, there is no force in any dimension that will stop us from tearing your heart from your chest and your head from your shoulders. No playtime, no games. This is not a threat, but the most solemn of promises. Do you understand? Though feeling increasingly weak, Yoruichi raised her hand and softly touched the face of the spirits before her. With tears falling down her cheeks, she said, I understand. I will do everything in my power to make sure that rain never falls here again. I love him, and I really do want to marry him, to be his, forever. Meeting the eye of the woman who held the heart of their king, the spirit simply said, only time will tell. Zangetsu, Shiro, let her go, a mild voice called from behind them. Turning, the group saw Ichigo standing above them, confusion on his face. Getting to their feet, the spirits quickly separated back into their individual selves and faced Ichigo, with Shiro still gripping her shirt. You're out of your mind if you're looking for an apology. Though, Shiro said with one last look at the bleeding princess and continued, Kitty, here, knows what's expected of a queen, if that's what you choose. We have nothing else to say for the moment. Take her, and we'll talk later. As he finished, he lifted Yoruichi by her shirt and tried to hand her to Ichigo, only to be stopped by her hand lightly grabbing his wrist. Shiro, one more thing, she started, her voice showing her fatigue, yet her eyes seemed determined. This was her moment. She had been brought here, beaten and thrown around, but she was going to show them that it was something that she had allowed. Though immensely powerful, and a veritable princess, it would never be said that Yoruichi Shihoin was above receiving her comeuppance. However, now that it had been delivered, a few things needed to be set straight. Pausing, the hollow gazed at the woman in his grasp before unceremoniously dropping her and removing his mask with a roll of his eyes and a scoff. Make it quick, Kitty, you look like you're about to pass out because you just had your ass handed, URRK. Everyone present stood in shocked silence at the high-pitched squeak that escaped the fearsome hollow. Yoruichi had landed on her feet and, having adjusted her shirt, had approached Shiro. Seeing her wearily stumble closer to him, Ichigo's and Zangetsu's confusion grew, until they heard her speak. Shiro, I meant what I said. If Ichigo does say yes, I will protect his heart with my very soul for the rest of my existence. His entire heart. So, if I am the queen, as you say, then you had best realize what that means. It means that I love him, and if you ever do anything to damage any part of his heart again, I will rip these off and create a trophy room just for them, got it? Standing in amazement, Ichigo looked down to see Yoruichi's hand with a very violent-looking grip on the crotch of his inner hollow. Before he could say anything, her gaze turned to the stunned Zangetsu, and she snapped, that goes for you, too. I take responsibility for what I've done, but if he says yes, then I am going to take responsibility for so much more. I took your playtime because I deserved it, but don't think for a second that I am some pushover. I would collect trophies from both of you, but that will only be the beginning of the punishment. If you don't believe me, try me. Raising her brow at the twitching and squirming hollow that looked torn between crying and killing her, she gave one more sharp squeeze before letting go. Turning back to Ichigo, she felt the last of her energy leave her, and she crumpled. Before she could hit the battered building beneath them, she felt a pair of arms gently catch her. Looking up, she fought off the darkness of unconsciousness long enough to whisper, "I love you. I'm sorry." As she succumbed to her fatigue, he held her closer to his body, shielding her from the still falling rain. Hearing a sigh, Ichigo turned his gaze to his inner spirits. Standing with a slightly wide-eyed expression, Zangetsu raised a brow and said, "It seems that our lives have the potential to become very interesting. I will make no apologies, Ichigo. You and your heart will always be what I protect. Though the methods may vary, that will never change. Go to your world, you have much that requires your attention." Turning to Shiro, who was kneeling with his legs spread generously apart and breathing heavily, Ichigo wished that he had a hand free to pinch the bridge of his nose when the hollow spirit grunted out his response. I don't know why, but I freaking love that bitch. XXXXXX. Ichigo felt slightly off balance when his eyes opened, and he noticed that he was kneeling on the ground. While his eyes slowly adjusted to the light, his attention was caught as he felt something shift in his arms. Looking down, he noticed a sleeping Yoruichi curled in his grasp, clutching at his haori. He breathed out slowly, as a sense of peace fell over him, calming his clouded mind. He knew that he couldn't say something as naive as, "It's over," yet, he felt secure in the knowledge that he had the chance for a new beginning. Finally noticing that he was back into the outer world, the dry air and silence took a moment to adjust to, and he watched as color slowly bled back into his surroundings. However, his sense of peace was overcome as reality flooded his senses and the scent of scorched earth and flesh filled his nose, burning his throat, and the sounds of the crowd murmuring reached his ears. Looking around, he held tightly to Yoruichi as he witnessed the devastation of Sokyoku Hill, and of all the men that he had killed. He closed his eyes tightly, taking in a deep breath. It was all too much. Too much sensation, too much pain, too much had happened. Abandon your fear, look forward, move forward and never stop. You'll age if you pull back. You'll die if you hesitate. Breathing slowly, he opened his eyes as he listened to the familiar words, now being whispered to him by the same spirit. The life of a king ain't a pretty one. You've got a strong heart, and you've got a strong queen. Just keep moving forward, king, and it'll turn out all right, Shiro said quietly from the confines of his mind. They're right, he thought to himself. We'll move forward, we'll be strong, and make all of this work. Thank you, he whispered quietly. There would be no pulling back. There would be no hesitation. Ichigo knew what his spirits meant by calling him king, and he was going to make himself worthy of the title. Pain was a part of life, but he would be damned if he would hinder the healing process. Taking one more deep breath, Ichigo stood up and turned to the crowd. Looking at the many faces, he saw looks of expectation, confusion, and one of frustration. His confusion on why he was seeing that expression vanished quickly as his father, who clearly had not witnessed the inner turmoil that he had just faced, shouted out once more. "Why the hell are you carrying her? This isn't some reality show, son. Damn it, did you say yes or not? When am I getting grandkids?" The loud ranting was silenced as Ichigo appeared in front of his father, who was standing with the other Shibas, the Vizards, the Arankar, and Yoruichi's parents. "Shut up, old man. We still have a lot to talk about, but have to wait because Zangetsu and Shiro wanted to talk to her." He raised his brow as a look of understanding crossed his father's face. The expression soon turned quizzical as everyone became aware of who Ichigo was holding. As the elder Kurosaki looked down to his arms, he stepped forward and reached out, saying, Do you want me to hold her for you, son?" Before he could step further, Ichigo tightened his hold on Yoruichi and stepped back. No, we have a lot to talk about, but she has already told me a lot." Composing himself, Ichigo sighed. This was going to be difficult to explain, but as he looked down on the peacefully resting Yoruichi, he couldn't stop the small smile that crossed his lips. Never taking his eyes off of her, he softly said, "Look, we have a lot to talk about, and a lot to work on, but we are going to do it together. We'll find a way out of this hell, and make our way forward from there." The calm and solemnity of the moment was broken by the sounds of deep sobbing. Looking up, Ichigo sighed much more loudly and rolled his eyes as his father stood, crying loudly on Amaya's shoulder. "My son is so mature, so romantic, just like his father. He's found the love of his life, and will soon make me lots of grandbabies that will be just like me as well." Exasperated groans arose from the entire group around him, which were soon drowned out by his dramatic wails. Yet, another sound rose above the clamor, catching everyone's attention. "No, damn it, just, look, hold your damn horses. Give him, ow, quit it, you little brat. Listen, he's busy and, damn it, stop." Looking behind his blubbering father, Ichigo saw a blur of figures in black cloaks twisting and twitching, and the crowd parted just enough for him to see a glimpse underneath one's hood of Grimjow twisting and turning like he was being attacked by a small black blur that was giving flashes of green. As the struggling continued, he was shocked to see a bright pink light shine out before a large explosion leveled the former Espada and causing confused shouts to ring out. All panic caused by the sight of Arrancar suddenly appearing in their midst was settled when the visors spread out around them, the snicks of Zanpakuto being flicked, their sheaths sounding out before Shinji spoke. "This is just the Arrancar envoy that we've all heard about. Calm it down, folks." The crowd quickly settled at the declaration, yet curious glances were still looking at the cloud of dust that had been kicked up. While the dust was clearing from the explosion that had occurred, Ichigo heard a loud wail of, "Ichigo! Nell wants Daddy Ichigo." Sighing, he was unsurprised to see Nell running out of the cloud directly towards him, shedding her cloak. It was obvious that Kazuki had brought gifts to the Arrancar envoy, and it was clear that they had been witness to the battle that had just commenced. "Maybe that will keep Tyr from kicking my ass, since the Arrancar were attacked. Who am I kidding? She's going to want to kill me," Ichigo thought, remembering her terms of allowing the envoy to come. Shaking his head, he turned his attention to the bawling Nell that was running to him. As she made it to him, she quickly climbed her way up to Ichigo's shoulder and grabbed his face. Grimmy wouldn't let Nell come see Daddy Ichigo, but Nell was so worried. "The bucket man said he would help Nell come see you, and gave us Heidi coats so we could see Daddy fight. Daddy was scary." Nell wanted to know that Ichigo was, she cut off as she saw that Ichigo was carrying someone. A woman. Ichigo groaned as the same look of recognition that had lit his father's eyes earlier crossed hers. Her head snapped back and forth between his face and Yoruichi's, and she finally gulped a huge breath of air before shouting. Is this my mommy?" All of the tension and confusion broke in the wake of the laughter that erupted. The Vizards and Arrancar all had their hands on their knees as they doubled over laughing, and even Kukaku and Ganju were laughing. Ichigo tensed, though, as he knew that hell was about to take a new meaning. Turning slowly, he felt horror begin to grip him as he came face to face with an Isshin Kurosaki, who had stopped sobbing, and now looked as if he had just found a massive vein of gold. Seeing a disturbing smile begin to cross his face, Ichigo quickly turned to Amaya and said, "Amaya-sama, could we please stay?" Before he could finish his question, the Shihoin matriarch took pity and said, "Now listen, you, quit with the honorifics. Of course you can take her to the mansion, but you must stay with her. She looks worn beyond belief, and I only trust you with her safety," she finished with a wink. Before Ichigo could express his gratitude at her help with an escape, however, a devious smile crossed her face. Turning to the bundle of energy on Ichigo's shoulder, Amaya held her hands out and said, "Nell, is it? Why don't you stay with me? I am Yoruichi's mother, and this is Daddy Ichigo's father. While he takes care of her, we would love to get to know you better." Excited by all of the mention of family, Nell leapt into Amaya's waiting arms, crying out, "Daddy Ichigo, are these Nell's grandmommy and daddy?" However, when she turned to get an answer, she was greeted with an empty space where Ichigo had stood, and a trail of dust that gave evidence to his departure. Reaching up and patting her head, Isshin smiled, "Don't you worry, sweetheart. Tomorrow, we'll have Daddy Ichigo, explain everything to all of us." The laughter that rang out at the declaration echoed across the sandy hill, providing a small escape for all present from the horror of what had been the day until then. XXXXXX. Yoruichi awoke with a jolt as a gentle wind created a noise when it disturbed the blinds. Her eyes were taking a moment to adjust to her surroundings, and her body felt heavy, but very warm. What happened? Where am I? Searching around, she found herself in a darkened room, with the only light being a soft glow from the moonlight outside. Finally realizing that she was in her room, she was also immediately brought to awareness as to why her body felt so heavy and warm. Looking down, she found herself completely ensconced in the arms of a peacefully sleeping Ichigo, his head resting on her stomach as he held her tightly. She quickly forgot about the temperature, as memories of what their lives had been for the past several days flooded her mind, bombarding her with thoughts of all of the pain, suffering and struggle that they had faced. They had faced so much. Yet, here they were. There had been pain, there had been sadness, and there had been grief, yet they had made it through. She couldn't say that it was a victory. There had been too much loss for that, yet, she would gladly say that both she and Ichigo had survived. Their hearts had been sorely tested, but they had survived. His heart. Yoruichi looked down into the peacefully sleeping face of Ichigo, and thought about the wonder that was his heart. So large, so open, and so deep, Ichigo Kurisaki's heart was something that she had only begun to appreciate. Capable of such great love, but also of bearing so much grief, it was a miracle that it was still intact. But it was, and they had survived. Yoruichi shook her head and rolled her eyes at herself. She couldn't help but to repeat her thoughts, over and over, replaying them in her mind. Still, why shouldn't she? They had made it. The elation that came from that knowledge was such that it made her want to replay their journey, yet again. Focusing her thoughts, she raised her hand and began to lightly play with Ichigo's hair. She began to wonder about how she actually got into the position that she was in. Obviously, Ichigo must have brought her here, but the last thing that she could remember was grabbing Shiro by the crotch and threatening him. She almost laughed aloud as the memory began to clear in her mind. The high-pitched squeak, as well as the looks, not just on his face, but on all of their faces, was something that she was going to treasure for a long time to come. Yes, Yoruichi, you can revel in what even I will admit is a stroke of genius later. However, I think you were focusing on something much more important. You know, Ichigo's heart, came an exasperated voice from her mind. Sighing, Yoruichi couldn't deny that her Zanpakuto spirit was right. Ichigo's heart was what it always came back to, and that was certainly not something that she was complaining about. His heart. What it really came down to was that she was going to guard his heart, forever. Clenching her other fist as she resolved herself, she hissed in pain as she felt a sharp pinch in her palm. Gently raising her hand to her face, so as not to disturb Ichigo, she opened her hand and felt confused. In her palm was a shard of metal, small, and it looked as if it had been chipped from some sort of. She froze as other memories rushed to the front of her mind. Broken towers, horrific weather, and pain told her exactly what the shard of metal was. The piece from Ichigo's heart, the one that she had caused to break. It seemed that Shiro and Zangetsu wanted their conversation to not be forgotten. Gently closing her hand, she felt the piece warm as she knew that she would both literally and figuratively be guarding Ichigo's heart for the rest of her existence. This will never happen again, my love. I'll never let your heart get to that point again, I swear it. You have no idea how much you mean to me, but I'm going to spend the rest of my existence showing you. Once you wake up, you'll never have any reason to doubt again. As if in response to her thoughts, the man wrapped around her began to stir. Yet, instead of the excitement that she knew that she should feel for them finally being alone and on, hopefully, good terms, she felt instant panic. What in the hell am I supposed to say? This question was one that should be much easier to answer than she was coming to find, but in all actuality, she could only wonder how to begin a peaceful conversation with the man whose heart she had broken. Sure, there could be an apology, but, weren't they past that? Wouldn't he hate to hear even more apologies? But if she didn't apologize, would Ichigo think that she was minimizing what had happened? She couldn't say something like, hey, how stupid would that be? Yoruichi caught herself as she felt her head actually move as it did when she scoffed. This was going nowhere. Here she was, having an internal anxiety attack over greeting the man whom she knew more deeply than even her own self, so much that she was actually beginning to act out the questions that she was asking herself. Focus. He's going to be awake soon and you'll have to. Her thoughts were interrupted as the man in question shifted, turning his sleeping face up to Yoruichi and breathing in deeply, then exhaling with a sigh. She couldn't help but smile at his peaceful expression, yet her nose quickly wrinkled as the exhale reached her. Morning breath. Wait. The unpleasant smell seemed to unlock something within Yoruichi. She couldn't say what, but a sense of peace fell over her as she held her lover. Stroking his hair once more, a wide smile took over her face and she lightly giggled. This was all that she needed. All of the worry, the questions, the panic, what was the point? This was Ichigo. Yes, they had some work to do, and no, it wouldn't all be pleasant, but still, they were back together. They could do this. They would do this. Feeling him shift again, Yoruichi looked down to see Ichigo's head raise slowly from its resting place on her abdomen. He didn't let her go, but he looked up to her face and spoke. Was it? His groggy voice croaked. As the moonlight dimly illuminated him, Yoruichi couldn't help a small chuckle at the sight before her. Though he had appeared more fierce than a god just earlier that day, she now got to, once again, bear witness to what she lovingly referred to as her sleepy Ichigo. Hair sticking straight up on his right side, she also saw a small line of drool connecting him to her stomach, as well as a lost, half-lidded expression on his face. Yoruichi was not what one would call a girl's girl, but damn it all if her sleepy Ichigo wasn't the cutest thing she had ever seen. Continuing to run her hand through his messy hair, she swallowed the small lump in her throat and softly teased, "Hello, beautiful." The confused look only grew, until she saw consciousness finally register in his eyes. Here we go, she thought nervously, inhaling to speak. However, she was thrown off balance as Ichigo shifted his body and pressed his lips to hers. The moment that their lips met, everything else in the world ceased to exist. There was no hurt, there was no pain, there was only Ichigo and their love. Yes, she could most certainly say love. Ichigo's lips, though slightly insistent, seemed hellbent on proving this to her. His sudden grip seemed desperate, as if she would disappear, should he let go. Yoruichi's heart ached slightly at the fear that she still felt in his touch, yet it was something that she knew that they would overcome. He'd never lose her again. Reaching up, she wrapped her arms around his neck, pulling him more tightly to her. As she felt the lines of their bodies meet, her pulse quickened, and she felt that familiar pull. Her stomach felt as if it were full of butterflies, and she deepened the kiss. How she had missed this. The warmth of his body, the sensation of his lips. Yoruichi shuddered as the sensations threatened to overwhelm her. Pushing gently against Ichigo's chest, Yoruichi knew that she had to break them apart before things got too far. She felt his body responding to hers against her stomach, but she needed to make sure that he had one thing straight, first. Holding his face in her hands, and taking in his look of confusion, she fervently whispered, "Ichigo, I love you so much. I am so sorry for everything, but I meant every word. I love you, and want you for eternity. I really do." Looking up into his brown eyes, she was entranced by the hope that she saw in his expression. It made her heart pound even faster, and she smiled as she saw a small, sheepish smile cross his expression. He was still in there, her Ichigo. The same wonderful man that she had fallen in love with, that she adored with everything that she was. The same one that made her laugh, made her smile, filled her with desire. "It's been so long since I've smelled morning breath. Damn, it's hard to believe how much I've missed that," he whispered with a chuckle. And the same one who knew how to ruin a moment better than anyone she had ever met. "You ass," she shouted as she pushed him. Hard, harder than she had really intended. Unexpectedly, a wave of irrational anger overcame her, and she pushed again. Grabbing his shoulders before he could go flying, Yoruichi flipped him over, slamming him onto the bed and punching his chest. "Ass!" she exclaimed once more to emphasize her strike. "Here I was, try to apologize and set things right, and you have to worry about something that I can't help. Your breath smells like shit, but I was ignoring it so that I could give you an Apollo. Yoruichi's angry rant was cut off as Ichigo roughly grabbed her wrists. Shocked, she felt even more so as he yanked her down, rolling himself on top of her to where he was straddling her legs while still holding her wrists. Enough with the fucking apologies, Ichigo hissed. Though not as loud as her shout, he had never taken this tone with her. Eyes wide, she stared up into the face of the infuriated man that she loved. I don't want any more apologies. I don't want any more pity, or sympathy, or, damn it, Yoruichi, why is it so hard for you to get it through your head what I want? Yoruichi's confusion was mixing violently with anger. Such a wonderful moment was being ruined by this hard-headed jackass, and she had no clue why. She was fighting an incredibly strong urge to scream in frustration, but settled for matching his hiss. Well then, why don't you tell me what it is that you want, since I'm obviously so stupid? I've been bending over backwards to try and figure out how to make things right, but there's clearly nothing good enough for you, she snarled, while bringing a leg up and forcing Ichigo off of her and into a kneeling position. Getting up and matching his position, their faces were mere inches apart as they both breathed heavily from their respective outbursts. After only a moment's pause, Yoruichi was again stunned as Ichigo, none too gently, reached up with both hands and grabbed her head, smashing their lips together. The kiss was fierce, charged, and it caught her completely by surprise. What in the name of? Her thoughts were cut off as her lover moved one hand behind her head to hold her to him, and quickly moved the other to her lower back, pulling her forward and removing all space between them. Yoruichi's anger instantly evaporated, lost in the fire that was so quickly lit within her. No longer needing to hold her head to him, Ichigo's hands both hooked under her bent knees and pulled, using his weight to shift them into a position to where he was laying on top of her. After a few more moments of feverish and overwhelming kissing, Ichigo paused, raising up on one elbow and using the other hand to touch her face. You, damn it all, Yoruichi, all I want is you, all of you. I don't want secrecy, I don't want pity, I just want you. I need you, why can't you see that? He said with such passion that Yoruichi completely froze for a moment. Unable to speak, she responded by wrapping her arms around his neck and once more crushing his lips to hers. As their lips moved so much that they began to hurt, and the friction from their clothes began to burn, Yoruichi felt as if her heart were going to burst from her chest. Ichigo was still the man that she loved, and he had made it clear that his heart was calling out for her. Suddenly, the room became unbearably warm. The heat felt stifling, as if it was restricting and oppressing their senses. As their anger vanished just as quickly as it came, another feeling arose. A feeling that was the underlying cause of so much of their pain, yet so basic that it made them feel an almost primal desire. Need. Raw, unsatisfied need. They had gone through so much, and come so far, yet the worst part of it had been that they had forced themselves to face it alone. Neither had been able to take strength in the other, or to take solace in the peace that was their love. Their bond had been deep, their connection vital, yet it had taken them losing it to finally see just how truly deep it was. Yoruichi needed it back. She was beginning to worry that she would suffocate under the weight of her need for Ichigo. His very presence seemed to be a lifeline for her, at the moment, and his actions were telling her that he felt the same way. Roughly pushing Ichigo back, his confused look quickly vanished in realization as Yoruichi ripped his shirt off of him. However, it wasn't understanding that she saw across his features. Even in the darkness of the night, she could see the hunger in his expression. It was further proved as she felt her own shirt being ripped from her. Within seconds, both of them were bare, and with a single movement, the two became one again. It wasn't gentle, nor was it sweet, yet it was exactly what both needed. As Ichigo paused, when he could reach no further, their relief was akin to one who was dying of thirst finally being granted water. She couldn't stop the smile that came over her face as she saw his face relax in relief. He had heard her. Sure, it would take time to reforge their trust, but it would be done. Seeing the hint of a smile on his lips, she traced her fingertip along his jaw and asked, "So, does this mean that you got over my morning breath?" All tension broke, and her heart melted as she heard him snort loudly. As he buried his head in the pillow at her shoulder, she heard the unmistakable sound of his laughter. Holding him tightly to her, She began to laugh with him. I'm still pretty damn good with words, huh? He chuckled as he raised his head to look at her. Shakespeare would be proud, she responded with a roll of her eyes. Yoruichi hummed slightly as he reached down and brought their lips together once more, far more gently this time. Damn, I've missed you, he said as he drew back. Unwilling to let him go too far away, she wrapped her arms around his neck and brought him to her. Me too. Don't worry, I am never letting you get away from me again. You're stuck with me, Captain Kurosaki. Sensing him shift his body, her blood heated again as she felt him press himself to her and heard him say, you better not, and that's a pretty literal statement, Lady Shihoin. XXXXXX. The sun's first light found a spent Ichigo and Yoruichi gasping for breath. Their morning had been nothing other than re-establishing their bond, over and over again. Each time they would reach their completion, a tender look or kiss was all it would take for them to begin anew. While Ichigo had loved every moment, a lingering thought continuously plagued his mind, Yoruichi's proposal. Of all the things that he could have prepared himself for, that was most certainly not one of them. Not only that, but in front of the entire Seraiti, Ichigo's thoughts were in turmoil as he tried to make sense of it all. What's so damn hard to make sense of? She still loves you, and asked you to marry her. Even you can't be this dumb, King, Shiro grumbled in his head. He is right, Ichigo. Think about what is really bothering you, and then be a man and deal with it. The weather in here is finally calming, and if you disrupt it over your inability to handle your pride, the consequences will not be pleasant, Zangetsu said in a voice that showed exasperation. He means that we are gonna pummel your ass, and then pull your head out of it if you don't get your shit together. Yeah, alright. Get off my case about it, will you? Ichigo exclaimed in his mind. Yeah, he may have been thinking a little petty, but this was something important to him. Feeling Yoruichi shift on top of him, he turned his attention back to her, surprised to see her getting off of him and moving to the floor. What are you? Oh damn, he said, pausing as she bent over, fully naked, giving him a perfect view. He couldn't help but chuckle as she paused from rummaging through the strewn clothes on the ground, turning to give him a wink before turning back. Yet, she began to wiggle her hips slowly, keeping his mind occupied until she stood up and turned around. Wondering what it was that she had done, he was about to ask until she crawled back onto the bed, and onto him, straddling his legs and letting her core rest perfectly onto his. Both squirmed slightly at the sensation on their recently overused areas, but soon found a comfortable position. Looking up, he saw a slightly uncertain look in her eye. Not that I didn't love the show, but what was that about? He asked, confused. Smirking at his comment, Yoruichi brought her hands up, opening them to Ichigo. In one, the shard that she had awoken to, and in the other, the small box that contained his mother's ring. We have a few things to talk about. Noticing that she had his undivided attention, she weighed her options as to which topic to tackle first. Still slightly apprehensive about her proposal, she continued, I'm sure that you have questions, so let's start with this. Holding out her hand, she showed Ichigo the metal shard. Why do you have a chipped piece of metal? Did that come from your Zanpakuto? He asked worriedly. Yoruichi tried to drown out the indignant scoff and angry retort that her Zanpakuto spirit was shouting. Clearly, Ichigo did not know Juryoku, or he never would have suggested that she could be broken. Cut him some slack, he's obviously worried, Knowing him, he's probably already blaming himself for thinking that he caused you to get hurt. Seeing her wince, Ichigo asked, is everything okay? Look, I'm sorry that Ichigo, Yoruichi interrupted, yet again placing a finger over his lips. Juryoku is fine, she was just a little displeased with you assuming that someone could break her blade. Yoruichi wished that she had had a camera at that moment. The shape of his mouth as he understood what she was saying was just as adorable as his expression when he had first awakened that morning. Oh, sorry about that. Anyway, do you remember what happened inside your inner world? Yoruichi asked, scanning his face closely to try and discern any clues as to his thoughts on the matter. Sure enough, she saw his eyes tighten for a moment, only to soften as a smirk lit his face. You mean when you had the grip of death on Shiro's junk? Yeah, I don't think I'll ever forget the noise he made, Ichigo replied, and also winced as it was clear that Shiro had something to say about that. She couldn't help but chuckle at the memory. While that is a memory I'll always hold dear, I was actually talking about something else. Do you remember where you found me? On what I was standing. Recalling the memory, Ichigo frowned. He remembered finding her, soaked and bleeding on a beam that he was all too aware of. Shiro and Zangetsu had informed him of their tactics, and he had been less than pleased. Sure, he understood their point of view, but did not approve of essentially torturing Yoruichi. Yeah, you were in the building that represented my ability to trust and love others. I was on the beam that supported the whole building, Ichigo. They had destroyed everything around it, but they couldn't touch the beam, she said, chairs slowly building again. Saying this aloud was proving to be far more difficult than she could have imagined. Not only the pain of what she had done, but the difficulty in swallowing her pride enough to face the shame of what she had done. Taking a deep breath, she held the shard between her fingers and continued. Ichigo, they couldn't touch the beam, but I did this. On such a vital building in your wonderful, incredible, unbelievably enduring heart, I was able to damage it. I'm so sorry, Ichigo. I never meant to hurt your heart, I swear it. I am so sorry for ever making you doubt, for making you hurt. Yoruichi paused for a moment to compose herself, putting her fingers over Ichigo's lips once more, as she saw him ready to speak. Pushing back her guilt and remembering her earlier inner declarations, she said, what they showed me won't ever leave me. However, Shiro and Zangetsu gave this to me for safekeeping, and as a reminder. Ichigo Kurosaki Shiba, I swear on everything that I am, or ever will be, that I will keep this in your heart safe. Yet, the moment she finished, she couldn't help the twinge of insecurity that reared its head, making her add, however, if you want to keep it yourself, I can't say that I don't understand. Unable to keep quiet any longer, Ichigo sat up, pulling her to him in a tight embrace. After a moment, he pulled back, looking down to her hand before closing her fingers around the shard. Yoruichi, take it from a pro on the subject, you can't let guilt keep you down. What happened is already behind us, and we're not going to focus on that stuff any longer. You've apologized, and have more than shown remorse. We'll never get anywhere if we're just looking back all the time. I never thought that I'd say this, but it looks like you're the mature one here, Ichigo, she chuckled. For the moment, at least. You're right, though, the future is ours, and I'm never letting you get away again. I like the sound of that, Ichigo said with a small grin. Grabbing her hips, he pulled Yoruichi closer until she was just inches from his face and said, you need to get it through your head that you're mine, for good. I'm sure as hell yours, so you need to get with the program, kitten. I think we've both proven what lengths that we'll go to protect us, so you had better be ready for forever. Kissing him quickly, Yoruichi leaned back slightly, putting the hand holding the ring in between them and asking, care to put your money where your mouth is, Kurosaki? Ichigo paused at the sight of his mother's ring. It was clear that, should he choose, it could become Yoruichi's ring. Though her words were confident, he hadn't missed the slight break in her voice when she had asked. Did she honestly still worry about his answer? Had she paid attention to nothing this morning? Still, he could understand her worry. With all that had happened, she would be worried about him, and his response to her proposal. Hell, even when things were great, he was still worried about her answer, so he couldn't fault her for the stress. However, he was ready to put all of this stress, the rigidity, the walking on eggshells, feeling that was still present between them, behind them. Not only that, he still had his pride to deal with. What are you doing? He asked softly, a reluctant look on his face. Not expecting that response, Yoruichi was stunned. But you were going to. I just wanted to show you that I was serious, and that you weren't a secret, she explained quickly. What was wrong? Did he change his mind about marrying her? Was he going to back out of it? Was he going to? What in the hell were you thinking? Stealing my proposal like that? Ichigo shouted, an indignant look on his face as he crossed his arms and turned his head like a petulant child. Was he going to worry her so unnecessarily that she instantly contemplated murdering him? Torn between the relief that he wasn't backing out of their relationship, and the stress that came from the fact that he had worried her over something as stupid as who proposed to whom, Yoruichi grabbed a pillow from the bed and began mercilessly beating him with it. You, whack, stubborn, whack, ass, whack, why did you have to say it like that? Whack hack, I thought that you were going to end things, you bastard, whack hack. Are you so chauvinistic that you have to be the one to propose to me for it to be worth anything, whack hack hack. Ow, 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 damn it, Yuru, ow, quit hitting me with that damn pill, ow. His pleas were getting him nowhere, as he had clearly pushed the wrong button. Still, no matter how hard she was hitting him, her words still made him want to smile. She's serious about this. Yoruichi continued her onslaught against her brick-headed lover until she heard some rustling outside of the door. Soon, muffled shouts could be heard, and she quickly dropped her pillow-turned weapon and jumped up from the bed, grabbing a robe on the way to the door. What in the hell, was all Ichigo could get out before he was silenced with a glare. Sitting naked under the sheets, he didn't really have a chance to move before she opened the door, so he stopped talking. I don't know, but don't think that I'm done with you. You're going to pay for doing that to me. Making me worry like that. What an ass. I should show him what Shiro went through, then see if he thinks that nearly giving me a heart attack was worth it. Finally getting to the door, the rustling and shouting increased, and she quickly opened the door. Who is making all of this noise? She was cut off as she saw Isshin swerving back and forth, struggling to keep a hold of a little green bundle in his arms. Seeing that she had stunned the pair, Isshin looked up, and she noticed that the green bundle was a little, Arankar child. She didn't have time to study the being, as it squirmed out of Isshin's arms and darted into the room crying, Daddy Ichigo. Following the clearly girl Arankar's path, she heard it shout, Ichigo. Nell was so worried for Ichigo when she heard him saying ow. The speed at which the child was running was impressive, yet all present were surprised to see that, as she jumped towards the sitting Ichigo, a bright pink burst of Reiatsu exploded in the room, accompanied by a loud tearing sound, and a now large, pale blur tackled Ichigo out of the bed and onto the floor on the other side of the bed. Stunned, Yoruichi made her way across the room quickly, only to hear a much more mature voice crying, I was so worried, Daddy. I had to come make sure that you were all right. As she reached the other side of the bed, Yoruichi's blood instantly boiled as she saw a, undeniably and infuriatingly perfect, in her opinion, bare rump of a clearly adult Arankar. Shifting her position, she came to see her naked lover pinned underneath an equally naked teal-haired Arankar who was smothering his face with her large breasts and calling him, Daddy. Seeing him struggle, Yoruichi watched as Ichigo finally pulled his face out of the woman's cleavage, gasping for air as he turned and looked at her, a look of horror crossing his face as he noticed her glare and hands that were crackling with bolts of lightning. Wait, Yoruichi, it's not what it looks like. I can explain. Nell is. He was cut off as the Arankar in question placed her hands on his chest and pushed herself up, looking down at her form. I'm big again. Ichigo, I am back to my normal form. She cried, bringing his face back up to her cleavage as she smothered him. Lightning destroying the floor beside the nude couple brought the joyous cries to an end, and both Nell and Ichigo looked up to the infuriated Yoruichi, as Nell had instantly dropped Ichigo in surprise. Her voice dangerously low, Yoruichi growled, Ichigo, you have 3 seconds to start explaining this, or I'll make what I did to Shiro look like a light tickle. Yes, she was aware that she had only recently kissed a man that was not Ichigo, however neither of them had been naked or lying on top of the other. Her glare going from her terrified lover to the curvaceous woman straddling him, she saw him turn to her, only to see his eyes bulge nearly out of his head as he came face to face with Nell's bare breasts. Nell, he cried, as if just realizing what was going on. Looking around desperately, Ichigo picked up the sheet that had accompanied him to the floor, immediately wrapping it around the nude form of the Arankar. However, the relief was short-lived, as Nell looked down, only to have her own eyes widen and a dark blush stain her cheeks. It seemed that both had just realized that the sheet Ichigo had wrapped her in was the only covering that had made it to the floor, and now he was completely bare. Pulling the sheet over her eyes, Ichigo quickly said, Don't look, Nell. Just close your eyes until, pop. In another burst of pink Reiatsu, the sheet collapsed, coming to rest on top of a small bundle that began crying, Ichigo. Ichigo. Where is Daddy Ichigo? Making it to his feet, Ichigo was able to quickly gather his clothing from the floor, hastily dressing himself. Amidst all of the chaos, the cries, and the blood thundering in her ears, Yoruichi made out a sound that made her turn, and release yet another bolt of lightning at what she saw. Isshin Kurosaki rolling on the floor, laughing like a madman. XXXXXX. When everything had finally calmed down, Yoruichi found herself staring at a nervous-looking Ichigo, who was holding a now-dressed Arrancar child and sitting on the edge of their bed. Isshin had left. After getting multiple quips in, as multiple Shunko attacks were not something that he cared to continue experiencing, and it was just her, Ichigo, and Nell. Taking a deep breath, she pinched the bridge of her nose and said, "Ichigo, I would like you to explain exactly what in the hell it was that I just saw." Before he could begin to explain, the little Arrancar in his lap looked up at him and whispered loudly, "Who is that angry lady?" While he would have loved to have had a picture of Yoruichi's expression at the moment, Ichigo was scrambling for a way to explain the very long story that was his relationship with Nell. Again, he was cut off by Nell's not-so-subtle whispers. "She is really pretty. Do you think that she'll like Nell?" Realizing that she and Ichigo weren't going to get very far in this conversation privately, Yoruichi sighed and looked down to the cute little girl in her lover's lap. Seeing the wonder in her eyes, she couldn't help but smile as she asked, "And who are you? You made quite the entrance this morning." "Nell is Nell," she chirped, bouncing in Ichigo's lap. Ichigo saved Nell a lot when he came to Nell's home before, and Nell made him daddy when he came back to see Nell. "You also saved me, don't forget that." Ichigo nudged, trying to turn attention from her less than ideal wording. Looking up at Yoruichi's confused face, he continued, "Do you remember when we were going after Orihime? We actually met Nell and her fraction when we were going to Las Noches, and she ended up guiding us there. After a few fights with the Espada that we ran into, I ran into a stronger one called Neutra. He was about to kill me when Nell changed into the form that you, saw, earlier and saved me. She was once the third Espada, before Neutra broke her mask in a sneak attack and made her like you're seeing right now. Then, when we went back there, she, along with her fraction and the Vizards, help, decided that I was to be Daddy Ichigo. Nell doesn't like seeing Ichigo hurt, and now Nell gets to call Ichigo Daddy." Turning to Yoruichi, Nell quickly leapt from Ichigo's lap and landed in her arms. Looking into her eyes, the Arrancar studied her for a moment before saying, "You made Ichigo's smile come back. Shinny told Nell that you made him sad, but Daddy Ichigo's eyes don't look so sad anymore. That makes Nell happy." Yoruichi's head was spinning. A former Espada, now in the form of an Arrancar child, was not only calling Ichigo Daddy, but was also in her arms, telling her how happy she was that Ichigo was happy. The bad part was that she knew that Ichigo wasn't making this up. The look in his eyes was all that she needed to confirm that. Still, she knew that she didn't have anything to worry about when it came to this girl. The looks that she gave him, both in her current form, and even in her more mature version, were ones of familial adoration. She had seen much of the same with Soy Fawn, and could sympathize with the hero worship. "Why can nothing be easy with you?" she asked, exasperated as she shifted the little girl in her arms. Yet, even with her lover's penchant for landing in nearly inexplicable circumstances in every dimension imaginable, she could barely contain her smile. "This is what I love about you, you unbelievable pain in the ass. Damn it, it's so hard to stay mad at you, but you don't have to know that. In fact, I'd like to see you sweat a little to pay you back for your little tantrum about my proposal." "So, you decided that you're her daddy, Ichigo?" she asked, raising her brow at him as he sat on the bed. "Is that a title more for this form, or for what I saw just a few moments ago?" The look on his face was priceless. As his eyes widened, his mouth dropped open in surprise, before it began opening and closing as he tried to find his voice. "Now hold on a second. I never, well, even when I was in Hueco Mundo we never, she doesn't, damn it Yoruichi, what the hell?" Sensing her daddy's stress, Nell dropped to the floor and ran to Ichigo, crawling up into his lap. His stuttering was paused, as she looked worriedly up into his face and tried whispering again, "Is the angry lady mad because Nell saw little Ichigo, or because Daddy saw Nell's cans?" "What?" came the combined shout from both Ichigo and Yoruichi. It was instantly clear that many, if not all, of Ishin's quips were picked up by the little Arankar. However, it was only Yoruichi who only barely noticed a mischievous twinkle in the little girl's eye, and she wondered just how sharp of a mind lurked underneath the innocence of the childlike mind of this form, and within the form she glimpsed moments ago. Worried that she had said something wrong, Nell added, "Nell didn't mean to say that little Ichigo is little. Little Ichigo is MMF." She was cut off by Ichigo's hand covering her mouth, as well as him quickly adding, "Don't listen to that old fool. Nell, that man is a moron and you shouldn't say what he does." Once Ichigo's hand was moved from her mouth, Nell replied, but Grandpa said that it was okay for Nell to talk to Daddy about anything. Grandpa said that if Nell was going to be Daddy's daughter, that she had to be able to ask Daddy whatever Nell wanted to know. Ichigo groaned, "Is this what my life is becoming? Nell recruiting herself as my daughter, who Dad is corrupting from the start, and a wife who loves to bust my ba." "Wait, wife." Ichigo paused, mid-thought. Looking up sharply at Yoruichi, he noticed that she still had the ring box in her hand. "She proposed, and I never actually answered her." Tracking his gaze, Yoruichi felt the atmosphere in the room change. Ichigo's outraged ranting at Nell's words had vanished, replaced by a fathomless expression. His eyes never left the box in her hand, and followed it as she moved it forward, making it prominent between them. Ichigo felt a tension in his shoulders, yet it was from what he was finding to be an all too comforting nervousness. When he really thought about it, it didn't seem so inappropriate that Yoruichi proposed to him. Actually, the way she had done it, though he was clearly not ready for it at that time, was incredibly flattering. She had risked rejection, ridicule, and the wrath of her entire clan, all for him. Yoruichi Shihoin had asked him to marry her. Of all the things that he had experienced, or thought he would experience in his lifetime, this was the very last. He had planned so diligently to make sure that the moment, the words, and the entire experience would be perfect for the proposal, yet, there was a certain beauty in the way that she had done it. He knew what he had to do, well, what he wanted to do. "Nell, can you feel Grandpa's reiatsu?" Seeing her nod in affirmation, he continued, "Good. Can you do me a very big favor and go find him and tell him to meet us at my barracks? I need to talk to Yoruichi alone." Not expecting immediate compliance, Ichigo was shocked when he saw another nod of affirmation, and felt the small Arankar hug his neck tightly before jumping to the floor and running out of the door. As she left, Ichigo stood and walked forward to stand right in front of Yoruichi. When their eyes met, the tension increased to a point that it became nearly unbearable. Wanting to break the almost crippling silence, Yoruichi cleared her throat and breathily said, "I have never meant anything more in my life than when I asked you to marry me, Ichigo." Looking down to the ring box, which had just been opened, Ichigo again met her eyes. After a tense moment, his eyebrow raised and he flatly replied, "Is that it?" Feeling confused, Yoruichi searched her mind for any possible meaning to what he had just said. Was he mad? Was he wanting more apologies? What do you mean? Crossing his arms once more, Ichigo quickly turned his head away and said, "Well, I was planning on proposing to you. I mean, even now, you're talking in the past tense. You only said that you meant what you said to me, not that you do now. If you think I am going to make this easy for you after that stunt you pulled about me being called daddy, you're crazy. King, she's going to castrate you if you draw this out too much. While I love getting Kitty all wound up, I'm just telling you, her grip on your junk will make you wanna cry," Shiro warned within his mind. "She teases the hell out of me all the time. She'll be fine." Seeing that his wielder was going to dive into his grave with both feet, the hollow spirit simply chuckled and said, "You got it, Kingy. Actually, why don't you say this?" The shell-shocked look on Yoruichi's face made Ichigo want to laugh, almost as much as seeing her face morph into a scowl. Schooling her face back to pleasant, she said, with some effort to keep frustration out of her voice, "Ichigo, I still would very much like to marry you. But I was going to get on one knee, you know, when I was going to ask. I had a big, romantic night planned out for you, and a whole speech about how great we are together and all." A vein began bulging on Yoruichi's forehead as she grit her teeth almost hard enough to break them. He was milking this for all it was worth, trying to get her aggravated, and it was working. Still, She knew that he had some grounds for what he was saying. She knew that proposing after what he had just gone through would have been too much to take at the moment, so she grit her teeth and decided to concede this one thing for him. Kneeling down, Yoruichi knew that this would all be worth it after he said yes. Looking up to him, she took a deep breath and said, "Ichigo Kurosaki, I love you. Will you marry me?" Unexpectedly, Ichigo sighed. As he melodramatically turned his head away once more, he said, "I mean, this seems like a kinda lazy way to do it. I had done everything from get my mom's ring, to asking for your parents' blessing, to even prepping a whole bit about how much I love you, and I don't even get a, 'you're wonderful,' or an, 'I want to spend eternity with you.' Sigh, I guess, if this is the best that you can do, I suppose that I can say, holy shit." The explosion that caught him by surprise could be heard from over a mile away. XXXXXX. Rukia had gotten up early to attend to the barracks. While the wounded were being healed, the demolished structures and funerals to be planned weighed on her mind. She was grateful though, as she had stayed at the Kuchiki family mansion the night prior, and her brother had insisted on assisting her with her day. It meant a lot that Byakuya was here to help her, yet she was even more surprised as she found most of the captains gathered around the barracks, directing a large number of Shinigami who were distributing construction supplies. Isshin, who was holding Nell, Kazuki, the Vizards, the Shibas, and even the Arrancar envoy were all present, as well. "What is this? What is going on?" she asked as she arrived, perplexed at how this had been organized. Not that she was unhappy about the immense help that was being provided, but how had this occurred? A hand on her shoulder soon provided an answer. "Rukia, you and your captain are a part of the Gote 13. We have always supported each other, and will continue to do so," Captain Yukitaki said kindly. "We want the Seraiti to repair and return to peace as quickly as possible, and helping your squad recover is something that can help heal the wound faster," Byakuya added. "Still," he continued thoughtfully, "I must admit that I would much prefer your captain's usual nonsense to this." "As would I, Ni-sama. These past days have been so difficult. I wish that we could have some semblance of normalcy, or at least a way to get our minds off of what happened," she thought to herself. As if in answer to this silent prayer, a series of muffled explosions began to sound, with the sound growing stronger with each one. Very quickly, approaching shouts could be heard, with their volume increasing too. "Ow. Sanuva, shit. Damn it, I said yes. Ow, why the fuck do you keep, shit. Yoruichi, stop. Damn werecat, I said yes. Is this what I have to look forward to? A life of you overreacting and going all crazy on me?" Rukia was stunned to see a wide-eyed Ichigo racing towards the barracks, Yoruichi hot on his heels, and frequent bursts of lightning landing uncomfortably close to him. However, upon closer inspection, she saw something even more confusing. Ichigo was actually laughing. As he was running, the younger Shinigami could be seen occasionally snorting, using his hand over his mouth to try and to contain his mirth as he dodged her attacks. Even Yoruichi, behind him, had the same terrifying smile that she did when she had trained Ichigo before. "What in the, come on Kitty-chan, don't be like, oh wow wow wow." This time, however, it seemed that Ichigo's taunting was ill-timed, as Ichigo received a small bolt of lightning to his rear. "You bastard, it was not lazy. Just because I'm not some stupid poet doesn't mean that my proposal is worth less than yours. You're going to pay for milking it, you ass," Yoruichi shouted, pointing at Ichigo aggressively. Rukia wasn't clear exactly what was going on, but the context was becoming apparent through the words being shouted, as well as the shiny glittering jewel that she saw on Yoruichi's left hand. Laughing briefly at her best friend's actions, and subsequent predicament, all sound came to a stop when a young voice cried out, "Daddy! Don't get hurt, Daddy!" Running away from Isshin and towards the now frozen Ichigo, Nell jumped into his arms and climbed to his shoulders, hugging his neck from behind. "Nell won't let you get hurt, Daddy." Murmurs began to stir as the officer corps of the Gote 13 bore witness to their newest captain having an Arrancar child calling him Daddy, while a former captain appeared to be trying to kill him. Turning to her brother, Rukia saw his eyes widen in surprise. Yet, nothing could prepare them for what happened next. As Yoruichi stopped, her right hand still crackling with lightning, the young Arrancar on Ichigo's shoulder loudly cried out, "Mommy, stop." Mommy shouldn't hurt Daddy. Yoruichi's mouth fell open, and her expression became one of pure shock. The look on Yoruichi's face brought about silence once more. Silence, which was quickly shattered by one lone voice laughing. Turning once more, Rukia looked to see her brother, Byakuya Kuchiki, the most solemn man she had ever met, laughing loudly at the face his former mentor wore. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.